welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we're going to talk about the International Day of Remembrance. My guest is Chadra Pittman Walke. Welcome.
Thank you, Robin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Good to be here again.
Yes. This is a topic I think that a lot of people don't think about much and don't really know much about.
Right.
So what prompted you to start this local honoring of the Middle Passage?
Well, it's interesting. I would have to go back to my time at the New York African Burial Ground Project. It was a burial ground that was discovered in Lower Manhattan, and it remained hidden for so many years. And they were building a $276 million building, and they had to do a cultural resource survey. They did the cultural resource survey. They discovered on the historic maps that there was this Negroes burying ground there. And they said, oh, we won't find anything. It's hundreds of years ago. Well, after 419 intact, full men, women, and children that were excavated from this site, New York was just astonished that one, slavery happened in New York, that slavery was cruel in New York. And so from that burial ground project, I saw the community come together and rally around these bones that they didn't know who these bones were. They didn't know if they were family members. And it made it such an impression on me. And when I was in New York, I would go to different events. We would do remembrances at the actual burial ground. So we had people coming in from Africa, doing libations, asking for atonement for their participation in the enslavement trade. And so when I moved to Virginia and I learned the history of this area, we are at the beginning of slavery. We're at the contraband story with the end of slavery. But there was no discussion over this middle part. And so for me...
Well, there isn't much discussion about slavery, period.
Well,
Let's
that's
be
true.
honest.
Well, absolutely.
It is painful for everyone to talk about, whether you're African American, whether you're Caucasian. I mean, it is a tough subject.
It's
and so
a tough
we
subject.
know it, we bookmark it,
right.
but we don't really talk about it.
No, and we don't, there's a lot of emotions around slavery. There's shame, there's guilt.
There's anger.
There's anger. There's a lot of anger. And so people don't want to talk about it. And so, but that doesn't solve anything. Because what happens is that the things that we don't talk about, what we learn is that the things that, if we don't look at history and correct those things from our past, we'll repeat them. And so, I looked at the history here and I said, well, wow, we have this beginning and we have this end story, but no one's talking about the middle story. What happened to those Africans who did not make it off the enslavement ships alive? And so I said, I want to start this ceremony here. They've been doing it in New York for 20 some odd years, in Charleston, South Carolina. I think they're coming up now in their 18th year. And my good friend Deborah Wright came to Virginia to help me put on that first International Day of Remembrance.
Now, what year was that?
That was in 2012.
Okay.
And along with Jerry and John Spruce and Amani Dawson and Dimitri Clausen, who is a drummer, we came together and put on this first event, and it has grown tremendously. And I think it's because, Robin, it is that untold story. That's one of the things about Sankofa. We like to, I'm an anthropologist by trade, so we like to excavate history. We like to dig up those uncomfortable stories because we need to talk about them. We need to heal, we need to move on, and we need to reconcile with our past. So
it's going to take a while,
It's going to take a long while. It's going to take a long while. There's a man by the name of Brian Stevenson who wrote an amazing book called Just Mercy, and he's with the Equal Justice Initiative. And one of the quotes that he says that I absolutely love is that he says, slavery didn't end, it evolved. And I think that's so true because when you look at history, when you look at what happened during slavery, and then you fast forward to some of the issues that we're having in current day 2016, a lot of these things are unreconciled. There was a student that I was working with at one point who was being bullied in the school system, and they were calling him all sorts of names. They were saying things about him picking cotton because his ancestors picked cotton, and this is in 2015, 2016.
I'm just speechless.
Right, and so if we don't teach, and this is why, if we don't teach all children, African Americans, European Americans, Asian students, all children need to know the history of slavery because slavery is not African American history, it's American history. It's that chapter that's in the book that we want to put over here and we don't want to look at it. But as I said, that does not help us move forward if we're going to try to get to some notion of shared humanity, which is what we all have in common. So, yeah, Remembrance has grown tremendously. The first year we had 70 people. We've had as many as 400 people show up on Buckroe Beach. The event happens annually the second Saturday in June, and this year it's going to be June 11th, 2016. And we have just a full day of education, drumming, dance, poetry, theatrical performances. We give an offering to the water, which is really beautiful in honor of the people that didn't make it off the enslavement ship. So it's a really beautiful and healing ceremony. We invite everyone to come. This is our history. This is American history, really international history.
Yes, yes.
Because clearly the slave trade, everyone benefited from that.
The country profited.
Absolutely. America's capitalism is built literally on the backs of an enslaved population, enslaved Africans, as well as globally. When you think about, other countries that were involved. You had Europe coming over to Africa, picking up human cargo, and then taking them and dispersing them to North America, South America, the Caribbean.
The Caribbean.
So you think about what happens. That's why I laugh when people say, especially during slavery, you read these articles where they say, oh, they were lazy. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, you have people whose backs were broken building the foundation of the wealth of the Western world. And you think about, imagine not having to pay wages for 400 years. How far ahead that would put you, right? So, yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to go back, which is the notion of Sankofa, actually, of Sankofa bird.
Okay, so tell me about Sankofa bird.
Okay, so Sankofa, and this is also one of the things that I learned at the African Burial Ground. That was a very important time in my life. The Sankofa is an Adinkra symbol from Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana in West Africa. And so the symbolism behind this bird, or the proverb of Sankofa, is that reach back and fetch it. So if you look, the bird has its feet pointing forward, right? So in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've come from. So her head is back towards her tail, and this is supposed to be symbolic of the future. So this is, the notion of Sankofa is that in order to know and be able to heal from the pains of our past, that we have to be courageous enough to have those difficult conversations and reach across the table to people that may not look like us so that we can move on.
Well, in a lot of ways, though, the International Day of Remembrance isn't a difficult conversation. I mean, you're mostly celebrating the lives of the people who were lost,
Right.
rather than dealing with all of the difficult things that happen. You're not,
Well, we do. At Buckroe Beach, we do talk about some of the atrocities because it's important. It's important to go there. Like, we'll never know what it was like in the bottom of those enslavement ships. The voyages which took, up to 2 months. People were chained together with, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke says in this book, The Middle Passage, which I brought, he says that people had less room to move than a person in a coffin. So that's pretty unbearable.
Yeah.
The disease, people were choosing to starve themselves at some points. They were being force-fed. So the diseases were rampant. People were in horrible situations. I mean, it was a massacre in the middle is what I call it. And so at Remebrance, we do touch upon it because, and it's hard. It's age appropriate. So, I'm not going to go into, depending on who the audience is. If there are children there, I'm not going to go into the horror of it because they are children. And I think they need to know history, but it needs to be couched in a way that they're
ready to.
Yeah, and it's palpable for them. I don't want to scare them. But at some point, we will have that conversation with them because just like the Holocaust, just like Wounded Knee, just like all these other things that have happened, you have to reconcile them,
But you also spend a lot of time celebrating
Absolutely.
the culture.
Yes, we
and the
do.
people.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So a component,
balanced.
absolutely, a component of Remembrance is, the educational component. And then we have drummers, we have dancers, we have poets, we have all sorts of people that come out from the community that give of their time. We just did a performance at the Heritage Day with the Hampton History Museum. They're our big sponsor for Remebrance. They've been wonderful supporting us, as well as Parks and Rec has come on as a sponsor. But we had a dance troupe that came out. They're based in Norfolk, Makita. And it's an African dance troupe, and young girls were coming out and dancing. We had our drummers that were there as well. So yeah, it's a celebration of the life. It's really the funeral that they never got. So we are celebrating the culture, right? And part of that culture, I brought the shekere to show you, because this speaks to what we like to call cultural retentions, the ways in which Africans retain their culture. And Maya Angelou has a lovely quote where she says, "It takes more than being held in the bottom of an enslavement ship to erase someone's culture." And we know that Africans brought their culture here with them. So this is a shekere, and this comes out of West Africa. But the interesting thing about the shekere, so it's a gourd, it's carved out, it's painted with a lacquer, and then it has beads that are strung around it. This was actually given to me by Women of the Calabash. I was taking classes with them, Madeline Yayodele. They're an international performing group. But the interesting thing about this cultural retention is that you find these shekeres all across the diaspora. You find them in Cuba, you find them in Brazil, you find them in the United States. So how do you have something that started in Africa and it's in all these places, right? So that proves that Africans maintained.
Do you want to give us just
culture.
a little bit of the
Sure,
sound that it makes?
yeah,
Because
so,
it's a beautiful instrument.
Absolutely. So there's a bass sound, and so if you were to play it, I'll just move this, a sound would be, and you can shake, you can flip it, there's many ways to play it, but the sound comes out of the top, and then you
have the echo of the beads at the bottom.
Absolutely. So this is used in cultural practices and songs, traditional songs, as well as parties. You know, people play them. So it's for sacred events as well as for spiritual events.
Well, and it would have been an instrument that is fairly easy to make. So
Absolutely.
if you were in a country where your heritage wasn't encouraged to,
Right.
to put it in a very whitewashed manner, you could still do that. Gourds still grow in a lot of those countries that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
You can get beads and you can make your own. It's less complicated
Absolutely.
than some instruments and more portable. So Chadra, as we lead up to the International Day of Remembrance, you have an exhibit or a speech over in Norfolk.
Yes, absolutely. So we're so excited. The Slover Library has approached us. Sarah Kingsley, who is the community outreach person there, reached out to me about doing something together with regards to Remebrance. I was sharing the story of Remebrance with her, and it moved her, and she said, wow, I'd really like to do something here at the Slover. So we're going to have a media exhibit, which will be beautiful downstairs, which will showcase some of the images from past Remembrance ceremonies, and then I'll be giving a talk, and that's going to be on Tuesday, June 7th. So that's leading up to Remebrance. Remebrance is going to be Saturday, June 11th. And, you know, like I said, a full day of activities. It starts at 11 o'clock, and we remind people to remember that they're coming to the beach. So dress in clothing that will allow you to breathe, bring water. We will have water there as well. But bring your lawn chairs and your blankets or whatever you need and just come. Bring flowers, actually, if you want to participate in the offering. But plan to come for a full day of education and honoring, you know, these people who never got a proper burial. You know, it's a thing that we all need to participate in.
Well, and how interesting how much this remembrance has grown
Absolutely.
and touched people, that it is
Absolutely.
becoming a regional effort
Right.
now,
Absolutely.
more than, you know, a small local token, but to educate children and adults and to
Absolutely.
celebrate
Absolutely.
the culture and the lives.
Well, you know, it's so interesting. So interesting you say that, because the beauty of this Norfolk Hampton story is that, you know, when we talk about the contraband, we talk about the three men that risked their lives for freedom. They came from Norfolk to Hampton.
Well, they were Hamptons. They were enslaved in Hampton,
Right.
but their owners took them over to
Right.
build Confederate, you know, ramparts. I mean, they were helping. They were being
Right.
forced to help.
Absolutely. So for them, so you know, this whole
There's
notion
that
of
connection.
moving
Rode-
across.
They were like in Willoughby or somewhere nearby, and rode over.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in that story alone, I mean, speaks volumes about perseverance and determination to be free. Part of the reason why we had this ceremony at Buckroe Beach is because of its relationship to Bayshore Beach. And Bayshore Beach, as you know, in 1898, a group of African American men, because of Jim Crow, were not allowed to swim at Buckroe Beach. They said, well, we will purchase a plot of land and we will have our own getaway. And Bayshore Beach became the most popular tourist attraction along the East Coast. And so I chose Buckroe because I wanted to give an homage to those people, because it really speaks to this notion of self-determination. You know, we can't swim in this beach, but we'll swim over here. You know, we're going to provide an opportunity for people to enjoy the water.
Right, and that is such a part of Hampton's history.
Absolutely.
Africans are a huge, you know, at Hampton Heritage Day, where you were, there was the
Absolutely.
influence of the Native American culture,
Right.
which sadly has been a little bit stomped out.
Right.
There's not as much of it left
not as much,
here,
right.
at least in Hampton.
Right.
The African Americans, or the Africans who became Americans
Right.
eventually, and then the English and other European nations,
Right.
all working together
Yeah.
to create the 400 plus years of what is Hampton today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's definitely, I mean, I enjoy doing the Heritage Day every year because it's a beautiful way to see how far we've come, because the beginning of the history is painful, you know, when you think about the African and the Native experience. But to be able to come together on that day and acknowledge the pains of the past, but then, like Sankofa, look towards the future.
Look toward the future together.
It's a beautiful thing, yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope I can make it this year. It sounds like a wonderful event.
I hope so. Thank you for having me on.
And I hope to see you out at the International Day of Remembrance. Thanks for watching.